Age definitions are meaningless, just like gender. From an NBC drama, it's actually, I laughed a lot. I laughed a lot. So this is from MRC Newsbusters, and they have the story about NBC drama, and they have this clip, which is like, I don't know, it's like a minute or two long. And this young lawyer makes an impassioned plea that age is arbitrary, and we should be able to define our ages however we identify. Let's be real. If you can claim that, as you were born a man, that you're actually a woman, or you're born male, you're actually female, then why can't you change your age? It's an interesting argument. In fact, it's the argument they use to support the trans argument. Yes, what you're seeing is that in this show, a guy wants to change his age from 62 to 42 and says the point is it's an argument you can use if you're transgender. However, I think this actually does the opposite and proves the absurdity of some of these changes and restrictions. There's a reason why your ID will say M or F. Now, I understand it's complicated, right, when someone's trans, because if you are transgender and you appear totally female, then people might be confused. But think about the importance of why that M would be there in that case. Now, it may feel better for you and your identity to have it say an F instead of an M, but if you're male, that means medication, treatments, they're going to affect you differently. And this is a fact. We did a big segment on this for Subverse about how it was only like in the early 90s they actually started doing clinical trials for clinical trials had to include women and men because the biology was different and they affected them differently. And I've also read about how, females are affected differently by painkillers and things like that, in which case we need special treatment. So if let's say you have a heart attack, and then someone pulls out your ID and has the wrong classification for your biology. Well, that could put your life in danger. More importantly, your age can make determinations based on what may have caused you this illness, based on probability and what we expect. Now, let's read the story, but I will stress, I also want to highlight, this is a real story, okay? An NBC drama made a dramatized version of it, but this guy, Emil Rattleband, 69, tried to legally change his age using trans arguments. He lost. I think the reason he was doing it was because he was like making a point about trans, like he's not in support of these rules. I could be wrong, but in the TV show, they make it very much in favor of. Essentially, what they're saying in the show is that trying to change your age is a big ask. Meaning, ask for something truly absurd like, I'm not really 33, I'm actually 17. That way, when everyone says no, you walk it back to, okay, but what about gender? And they say yes. When in reality, I think it does the opposite. I think if you go to someone and try and tell them that you have a different age, they're going to be like, you're nuts. Because age is an important factor for many, many things. Like, you can't run for president. What if a 10-year-old said, I identify as 35, and they went, okay, and now you can run for president? Sorry, it doesn't work that way. Let's read the story. They say, the same week as the Supreme Court prepared to hear arguments about whether Title VII should include protections for LGBTQ individuals, NBC's legal drama Bluff City Law presented arguments of its own. They just hid the agenda initially in absurdity. In the October 7th episode, 25 Years to Life, attorneys Sidney Strait and Anthony Little go to court on behalf of their former law professor, whose petition to legally change his age from 62 to 42 has been rejected by the city. In court, Strait makes an impassioned civil rights argument on Professor Marshall's behalf, saying age, race, gender, and orientation all have definitions that evolve. Quote, we create categories like race, gender, orientation, and we think we know what those words mean because we think their definitions are fixed. But those definitions evolve, she argues. Orientation started with the assumption that it couldn't be fluid. Gender started as a biological classification, not an identity. Let me just stop you right there and say it can be fluid, but it was never assumed that it couldn't be. I'm talking about orientation. That's why there's a B in LGBT for bi, because there is fluidity. There are people who have relationships with both men and women. No one said that couldn't be. I mean, for a long time, people knew it existed, but it was frowned upon. It's not an issue of whether something can exist or is defined. It's an issue of societal acceptance. The real argument that she needs to, or I should say the argument I'll push back, I know it's fictional, but they're doing this on purpose, is that no, there was no assumption it couldn't be fluid. Now you want to talk about gender fluidity. That's like, we're talking about style, right? Here's the big problem with gender fluidity. You can't transition between male and female physically over and over again. Like, there's a limit. There are people who've detransitioned and got surgery to do so. But if you're born male and you get gender affirming surgery to become cosmetically female, first of all, you're not really female. You're still male, but you've, altered your body and you use external hormones to make those changes. Let's be real about the science. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. So that's why it's called affirming surgery. It's creating an outward appearance that reflects how you feel on the inside, but it does not make you female. Perhaps in the future, they will figure out something in that regard. But for the time being, there is no real gender fluidity. The concept of gender fluidity is contradictory in the LGBT community itself, in that if somebody, you see a lot of these gender fluid people who will sometimes wear jeans and a t-shirt and sometimes wear a dress. That's just simply talking about the clothes you wear and not whether you're male or female. You see the conundrum here. The non-binary trans is very, very different and at odds with the actual idea of binary transgender-ism, I guess you'd call it. Let's read. Gender started as a biological classification, not an identity. That's not true either. Now, gender has come to represent biology, but I believe the word gender was created to talk about the social aspects of biological sex. I mean that seriously. So my general understanding is that around the 50s, someone was trying to explain how some things could be masculine and feminine. What was a word you could describe that wasn't biological, that represented a word that was feminine and a word that was masculine? Case in point, when you're talking about, children in Spanish, niño and niña, the gender is the a or the o. So it was a reference to social issues. That has been taken and stretched to mean that you literally can change from being a man to a woman. I'm sorry, we don't have the technology yet. Maybe they'll figure it out, maybe soon. But for the time being, it's fantasy. You can't change, you can't transform, you can't shapeshift, you know what I mean? You can get surgery to change the appearance, but even that's obviously not perfect. It's just surgery. Let's read on. I'm not trying to be a dick, let's just talk about reality. But revealing the show's true purpose. The bulk of her arguments had nothing to do with age. She continued, "This is why so many young people are coming forward and saying your definitions are out of date. I may have been labeled a man when I was born, but I'm a woman. Or maybe I was told to be attracted to one, but I'm actually attracted to them all. We all have the right to privacy, and that includes the right to have our true identities recognized by the court, especially when people are already being discriminated against for having those identities. When it comes to his age, who are we to say he's wrong?" she closes. The judge finds some merit in Straight's argument and declares that the world is changing, but courts and lawmakers are turning a deaf ear to real discrimination. Mr. Little and Miss Straight, I hope your argument will serve as a catalyst for real cases about orientation and identity. For these are people who should have their day in court, the judge says. However, she still denies the age change petition. The judge tells Marshall off the record that his claim is ridiculous and to simply lie if he wants to date younger women. Full stop. How is it ridiculous? If you want to assert your biology is something different from what it is, why do we stop at gender? If someone can get a document that doesn't even have an M or an F on, it has an X, why can't I change my age to, I don't know, like the Prince symbol? Why does it have to be a number? What about infinity? What if I want my age to, so the problem is classifications for gender and age are for a reason. They're specifically for a reason. And we're now doing away with a system meant for, using medical circumstances as an example, there's a reason why we classify people as what they are. Look, gender is bimodal. Biology, it's bimodal. So as I mentioned in a video the other day, the most effeminate male is more effeminate than the average female. That doesn't mean the person is a woman or should be told to transition. It just means they're effeminate. That happens. And the same is true for a masculine woman. The most masculine woman is more masculine than the average male. That doesn't mean we should tell everybody they're trans. Some people are trans and deserve all of the rights and protections afforded with, civil liberties that everyone gets. And some people probably aren't. But that's what we need to be careful about. The point is, if you can change legal documents, why can't you change age? In fact, I would argue age is already protected. You just need a judge to rule on it. The law in New York, for instance. They say she tells him to simply lie if he wants to date younger women. After the verdict, the professor's final conversation with his attorneys proved it was never about age at all. It was all about creating precedent and building arguments for protections for LGBTQ individuals. I'm sorry. If the judge ruled against it, the precedent created is against LGBTQ individuals. Poor and sloppy writing. They've only created an argument for why we shouldn't allow trans people to have their day in court. If you're arguing your biology is different from what your documents say, they have ruled against that. And that precedent will be cited against trans people. This was absurd. In trying to win my absurd theoretical case, you gave people with legitimate claims another argument to use to fight in court. No, you didn't. To lose, as I knew you would. In fact, that argument will fit in nicely with that amicus brief I'm writing for the U.S. Supreme Court, the one on the subject of their needing to rule in favor of protecting gender identity under Title VII. Before saying goodbye, he tells them his girlfriend is 59 and his son. She's 25 and brilliant, and her father is very excited to tell her what you both did today. Let me just stress, the court ruled against him, arguing his biology is what it is, and it was ridiculous. How will that protect anyone who's trans? If I was to say anything, I'd say this show just accidentally, or maybe it was on purpose, gave an argument to conservatives as to why the whole thing is silly. And that's bad. So it's bad for the LGBT community, I should say. It's not in defense of. Anyway, the story is based on something real, is this guy in the Netherlands, but I'll leave it there. I don't know. You let me know what you think in the comments. Stick around. Next segment's coming up in a few minutes, and I will see you all shortly.